Kia ora, welcome everyone.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Great to have you all here. I still think it's magic how, you just push a button and everyone appears on a screen.
Yep.
Bit of thought. Well, welcome everyone to this session focusing on the COVID response and future of learning. Ko Cheryl Doi tōku ingoa. My name's Cheryl. I'm one of the trustees of Ako Ōtautahi. We're going to have a really dynamic next hour, and so we're just going to start with a little bit of information about Ako Ōtautahi, and so I'm going to hand over to Ellie to do a quick introduction too.
Nā mihi nui ki a koutou, ko Ellie Archer taku ingoa. I am one of the trustees for Ako Ōtautahi or Learning City Christchurch. And this week has been crazy, full of learning, and our hopes are that, learning is multi-generational. And it moves past just this week, that initiatives are popping up all over the place, and we're connecting them together along with the learning and what learning looks like today and tomorrow. So kia ora, really looking forward to this kōrero from Joanna. Gonna be some good stuff, and over to you, Erica.
Kia ora koutou, no mai haere mai ki kōrero, ko Erica Tokingoa. Welcome everyone. I've just been admitting people in as we go, which is great. Just three things from me. We want this to be an interactive session, but to just make sure that there's no distractions, please mute yourself unless asked to be unmuted. The chat function is our friend, so please do put in any comments, observations, reflections when people are speaking and when Joanna is presenting. We also really love to interact with you, so if you can put your video on, that will be awesome. Otherwise, you can also utilize the reaction button down the bottom. I know Ellie just used one of the reactions. It's quite cool with all the different types of emojis. And the last thing is that this session is recorded, and we will be sending the video link out to you so you can reach other audiences that aren't able to attend, and also be able to share it with our community as well. So kia ora, back to you, Cheryl.
Great. So I'm just going to share my screen so that we can begin. And just by way of introduction, this session is part of our Ōtautahi Learning Days. It's COVID recovery and the future of learning, but it's part of a wider week we've had celebrating all sorts of learning across the city. And so you probably may not know anything about Ako Ōtautahi-Learning City Christchurch, but our vision is for a coordinated, equitable and future-ready city where learning and well-being is accessible for everyone. And really what we are trying to do is surface some of those ideas and connect them and tell the story. And this week we've been able to do that through some of our Learning Days activities. As a trust, we're a charitable trust. We focus on three things mainly. The first is equity. The second is access, and the third is innovation. Those are at the heart of the work that we do. So welcome to the session. And I'm going to just, by way of introduction, many of you will know Joanna already. Joanna's the Chief Executive of ChristchurchNZ, which is Ōtautahi's promotion and economic agency. Over the next hour, Joanna's going to share heaps of information. I've had a little preview, and there's some really good stuff that she'll be sharing, some updates about some of the changes being experienced here in Ōtautahi Christchurch, some of the impacts not just on employment but on a whole lot of different areas, and the skills that will be needed to guide us into the future, and also what some of the opportunities might be for us. So I'm going to hand over to Joanna, and she's got lots of really, really interesting slides. So I'm so pleased that we're recording it as well. And at the end, we hope to have some time for questions. So I'm going to hand straight over to you, to Joanna, to share such a wealth of knowledge with us today.
Oops, sorry. Kia ora, everybody. Let me just work out my slide sharing, which is just gone a wee bit skew. Just bear with me. Okay, can everybody see some slides in front of you?
Yeah, it's looking good.
Give a thumbs up, great. Well, kia ora koutou. Look, it's just such a great privilege to be here with the Ako Ōtautahi-Learning community, and I've heard really wonderful feedback for the events that have been held across the group, and I know that just an enormous amount of effort has gone into those. I think everybody is feeling that it's been a very long week, but really fulfilling week, as we've discussed across our community, not only the future of learning, but also some of the real challenges that are facing our learning community in this current context. So I'd like this to be partly a multi-way kōrero, where please do, if there's questions that you've got, keep them flowing through, and I'll seek to answer those as I go. And also Ellie and I will have a bit of a chat at the end about some of the issues that are arising within our current economic context. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on our economy, but also the impact on our young learners and also the young people who are within the workforce currently. I'm going to talk a little bit about the way our businesses are responding and the way that they'll need to respond in the future, and also what our city needs to do to continue to reposition our economy so we really are set up to be a smart, sustainable city for the future. But before I begin, I just want to introduce you to two young women. This is Lily and Maya, and these are our future workers, our residents that we have within our city today, but the young people who will be entering our workforce. And they'll be entering a workforce that is quite different from the workforce that I entered 25 years ago, and many of us are working within now. So as we think about the types of interventions and support that we give our young people, it's Lily and Maya who I hold very close to my heart as we start to think about our future workforce. So moving briefly now to COVID, I think everything here will feel really familiar to all of us. We know that COVID has had an unprecedented impact on our economy and on our society. We know that there are large numbers of people who are moving out of the workforce as a consequence of COVID, and we're starting to see that flow through into our economy and into our society. Most impacted, we've heard a lot about the tourism sector, but also about the sectors that are related to tourism, so hospitality, our accommodation sector. We know our small and medium enterprises are particularly vulnerable, and there are vulnerable workforces within each of our sectors, and notably low-wage workers. Māori have been disproportionately impacted, and at a national level, women have also been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. The sectors that have been least impacted are those that have been able to continue to operate largely unimpeded. And they are the primary sector, which has been able to continue to operate as an essential service. Our exporters are also experiencing large volumes and continuing to be able to participate strongly in the economy. And our manufacturing sector is also performing strongly despite the challenges of COVID. And we know that this will have an ongoing impact right across a number of years, if not a decade to come. So we're expecting a double-dip recession through 2021. We are expecting to see more business failures over the next 12 and 24 months. And that leads to a loss of confidence as investors start to just hold on to their money as they sit back and say, what is actually happening with our economy, and do we have the confidence to invest? And then that will start to flow through to our social well-being. This, as we know, really does impact negatively on the way people perceive their well-being and their future, which impacts stress, leads to higher levels of isolation, and in turn negative mental health outcomes. And we know that there will also be further job losses as a consequence of the global pandemic, and this will have disproportionate impacts on our community and will serve to exacerbate many of the pre-existing inequalities that we know about. So there's some real challenges ahead for us, and as an economic development agency, as we start to think about how we respond to that, we're starting to identify priority groups within our workforce who we know need particular support over the next period. So they are our school students, our tertiary students, young Māori and Māori workers who find themselves unemployed, and our young people who are falling out of the system, and that group of young people who are not in education or employment or training, we know are particularly vulnerable. And then finally, industry itself needs additional support to help a number of sectors understand how they're going to navigate this next period. So I just want to talk briefly about each of these 6 groups before we start to talk about some of the ways that industry is responding to this. So our school leavers are facing an uncertain future. At the end of this academic year, there'll be 7,500 school leavers in Canterbury, and we need to encourage as many of these school leavers as possible into areas of training that are focused on the future of the economy. But we know that almost 40% of school leavers don't go on to further education, and that there's a danger that an increased number of our young people will fall into that niche group who are not in education or training or employment. So with respect to, so I'm just moving pictures of myself around the screen. You can see what I'm presenting. So with respect to NEET, we've currently got an estimated 7,400 young people who are fit within that classification of NEET within the Canterbury community, but only 160 of those young people are engaged with MSD. So only 160 are accessing the kind of support that they need to make decisions about their future. Our tertiary students, we're going to have 10,000 graduates at the end of this academic year who will be moving into the workforce, and they're moving into a really uncertain environment, and that has the potential to further exacerbate unemployment levels in a way that is not optimum. And then, of course, those who are moving out of the workforce and into unemployment right across Canterbury, taking into account all types of those who are classified as unemployed, as well as just that narrower job seeker number. There'll be 9,000 extra newly unemployed in our who have moved out of the workforce over the last 6 months. And that means there's almost 21,000 people in our community who are seeking work or who are needing to find new employment options. And then finally, industry itself, of course, needs some additional support through this period. Financial support to help upskill staff, support to help to move their own businesses into new areas where there are new opportunities, and help navigating this uncertain period. So whether that's governance support or marketing support, or just employment and industrial relations support as they seek to restructure their workforce, our businesses need increased intensive support over this period. And Māori, 22% of new job seekers are Māori, and as you heard earlier, you've heard a lot about reported nationally, Māori are being disproportionately impacted by this event. Large numbers of Māori were employed within the tourism sector, within retail, within hospitality, and as a consequence, this is further exacerbating some of the challenges for our Māori community. But it's not all bad news. I do like to make sure we're very clear that there is a lot of good that is coming as a consequence of COVID-19. There are, of course, a large group of people who haven't been impacted or whose businesses have in fact flourished through this period. But there's also some systemic change occurring, which is what really starts to excite me, is how are we re-gearing for a different future as a consequence of the shock of COVID. So we know that organisations and businesses are pivoting and showing some real resilience through this period and some real adaptability. We know that demand for different skill sets is starting to emerge, and we know that whole industries are being forced to reimagine, and it's not just tourism, it's a number of other industries who are responding to different ways of working and the needs of their workers who are now saying, actually, I want to work from home, I want to work differently, I want to collaborate differently as a consequence of our experience over the last 6 months. So workplaces are starting to adapt, and technology that previously was being introduced slowly is now being embraced wholeheartedly because we've seen the potential as a consequence of the pandemic. And companies themselves are being forced to pivot, and we've got lots of really lovely local examples, a couple of which I'll talk you through now. So this neat company, SI Solutions, it's a Christchurch company. It's a division of a large company called Ski Industries Limited. And they, I love skiing, I love the outdoors. It's part of why I live in Christchurch, which is why I particularly love this particular company. They produce snowmakers for a number of the ski areas internationally and here in New Zealand. And they saw an opportunity as a consequence of COVID to adapt some of their snowmaking machines to produce disinfectant that was then used by a number of councils across the country and across the world to disinfect areas like playgrounds by using the mister through their snow groomers to distribute disinfectant to create safer places for people to interact post-pandemic. And that just took a little bit of a shift to their business model and a little bit of shift to their technology, and they were able to respond very quickly and to the new market that had emerged. And that's one of the neat things that we know about Canterbury companies is they are quick to adapt, and the resilience that we've seen through the quake period plays really well to a company like SI Solutions that was able to adapt very, very quickly. Another neat example with one of our manufacturers, Earth, Sea and Sky, a tremendous local company. They supply all of the outdoor gear to the Antarctic programs as a consequence of our gateway status. But they, again, saw an opportunity as a consequence of COVID-19 and were one of the first companies to start to produce masks, which of course have now become needed right across the world. They worked alongside Lanico, who produced the filter, which is an Auckland-based company, partnered very quickly, and within days of the pandemic really starting to take hold, we're producing masks, and now many other New Zealand companies are doing the same. So again, an example of a company seeing an opportunity and adapting very, very quickly, and its workforce supporting that. So overall, if we look at the full economic picture in Canterbury, Canterbury is actually faring quite well through this period. This is a graph that's an index that pulls together a number of indicators of economic performance. It includes job seekers, it includes the performance of our manufacturing sector, the performance of our exports, and consenting. And what you can see here is that very steep dip that occurred during lockdown during March, and that really lasts through until April, at a very, very steep decline within the economy. But what you can see there in the red graph, which is Canterbury, is the way that Canterbury has recovered. And we're now sitting above the national average in terms of our economic performance. And this is really because we've been able to keep our economy operating really strongly, partly because of strength within our engineering, manufacturing and exporters. Now that's really good news for the people who are operating within those sectors and for our economy as a whole. But of course, it doesn't help those who have dropped out of the workforce, and that's where we need to start to think about the kind of support that's needed. Spending in Canterbury has remained strong. We thought we'd have quite a large impact as a consequence of the level 3 lockdown in Auckland in August, but in fact, Cantabrians continued spending in our local community, and spending in August this year is in fact 4% up above where it was this time last year. So some quite interesting things happening within our economy. Now, the other piece of good news is that we're really organised as a city. Because of our experience post-quake, we know that cities that are coordinated and have a clear roadmap for recovery are those that will thrive during these periods. So we were able to get organised very quickly. We've produced the Ōtautahi Christchurch Socioeconomic Recovery Plan, and that is designed to coordinate action right across the country, right across the city rather, to ensure that we can not only respond to this event, but also really be thinking about the type of city we need for the future and be taking steps towards that now. So the Ōtautahi Christchurch Socioeconomic Recovery Plan, rolls off the tongue, has 3 horizons within it. The first is the horizon we're in now, which is response to the immediate impacts of the pandemic. And then it goes all the way through to repositioning a smart, sustainable city for the future and taking actions towards that now. And so that's really important that we are coordinated. Our City Council have passed a resolution committing to this framework, and that enables us all to act with confidence within a coordinated framework. And I thought I'd just very quickly give you some examples of some of the actual programs of work that sit within that framework, because there's no point in having a framework if you don't actually use it and do things within it. So one of the first case studies I'm showing you is our commitment to an innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. So ChristchurchNZ, alongside our tertiary partners and alongside NSD and in partnership with Ngāi Tuahariri and Ngāi Tahu, are producing what's called an innovation ecosystem. And that's joining up all of the different parts of our ecosystem and incubation facilities within Christchurch City so that we're staircasing people right through the innovation ecosystem, from startup through to scale up to the point where they're ready for stage 2 investment. And what this means is that we're creating an environment within our city where we're saying if people are falling out of the workforce, they have other options. Our young people can start to think about starting businesses of their own and know that there'll be support within Christchurch City for that. So the first part is a connection between Te Ohaka at Ara, which is in partnership with Ministry of Awesome, and moving through to Think Lab services that are offered within the UC Business School. And we're also, MSD are coming on board to support young people to move from unemployment into self-employment within these facilities. We've made a 3-year investment as a city into this program, and we're really well advanced in terms of pipelining new, fresh businesses into this ecosystem to start to deliver real benefit. We're also working really hard with our businesses alongside NZT and Callaghan to drive good outcomes and help our businesses survive through this period. We work in partnership with the Chamber on this, and already the slide actually says we've helped 2,800 businesses. We've actually helped now 3,200 businesses over the last 6 months, and offered them and given them financial support to help them survive through this period. And that's things like matching business mentors, giving people the kind of support that they need so that they can keep employing young people and keep people engaged in the workforce through this uncertain period. And the third case study I want to share with you is a program which is a partnership between 2 of our low decile schools, Linwood College and Hayata Community Campus, where we're partnering with UC and with iwi to really encourage young rangatahi and Pacifica students into STEAM careers, to give them an opportunity to move into high value jobs. Now this came from an insight from Ngāi Tahu that if people are moving into STEM careers, they have a greater opportunity for success later in life and the opportunity to realise higher career aspirations. Now this program is just starting, but we're really optimistic this will start to develop further further career options for young people as we move them through the system. So we're really optimistic about what this program could look like for the future. But all of this doesn't mean much if we're not clear about where we're going. And as a city, we are committed to the future of being a smart and sustainable city. We have high ambitions around becoming carbon net neutral. And as a city, we really are committed to creating a place where we want people to invest their lives, invest in their careers, and have an opportunity to live rich and fulfilling lives. Now, part of this is understanding which are the sectors that we need to invest in as a community to make sure that we are creating those high value jobs. And so we've developed a program of work called the Supernodes. Now, many of you will be familiar with the Supernodes. They are industry clusters which are aligned with future growth opportunities. And through this work, we're looking to really leverage the local advantages that we have, connect that with industry, connect that with our learning community, and therefore grow critical mass within these sectors. The sectors themselves are aerospace and future transport, which presents an enormous opportunity for Canterbury. We've got a really strong natural environment, strong manufacturing and engineering sectors, and it makes Canterbury the obvious place for really testing technologies in this space and helping humans understand how they can move around the planet in different ways and leverage some of the technologies that we have here in Canterbury. Our food, fibre and agri-tech Supernode really plays on the strength that we have in Canterbury around the food bowl that we are situated within, and our strong understanding of farm-based systems and technologies to support future food and fibre. Health tech and resilient communities speaks to the strength that we have within our health workforce, but also our experience in the post-quake decade, where we really do now understand what how a community under duress will respond, and some of the technologies that we need to support a community through significant disruptive change. And then all of this is supported by strength within our high-tech services sector. And of course, it goes without saying that technology now underpins every single one of our sectors, and certainly a great many of our businesses. Now, to help us understand how to further develop our supernodes, we've spent a lot of time working with leaders of industry within each of these supernodes. And in May this year, we undertook a survey of a number of CEOs across our supernode sectors. And that gave us an understanding of where the heads of some of our largest employers were at and the kind of things that they were looking for as they sought to employ young people into their industries. Now, what was really interesting here is when we spoke to those CEOs, what was clear is it's not actually the specific skills that they're after, but a number of attributes that they are looking for in their young workers. So 89% of their employers said that their businesses were expanding or staying stable over the next 6 months. Now that's really interesting because this is a post-COVID survey. So these employers were planning to bring new people into the workforce. But they said the types of skills that they were looking for were not the technical skills specific to their industry, but the number one priority for them was young people who are prepared to work as parts of teams. So teamwork was the greatest attribute that they were seeking. Strong verbal communication skills followed that, strong interpersonal skills, the ability to self-manage, the ability to problem solve. And it wasn't until I think number 5 or 6 on that list that they started to identify the specialist skills as being the attributes they required. Now, what this tells us is that our education system absolutely must be prioritising collaboration, teamwork, communication, the ability to work cross-sector and to pivot very, very quickly. So this must be the priority for our educators and for our young people as they develop the skills for the future. Really interesting too, if you look further down the list, things like computer literacy and basic IT skills didn't start to feature until the middle of the pack for these CEOs, because it is just assumed that this is a hygiene factor for people. This is just a base requirement, but the workers that will be set apart are those that are able to collaborate and work as part of teams. Just checking the time to make sure I'm not talking for too long. So what does all of this mean for those of us within the education community or the skills community? We really need to be starting to think about the types of skills that our young people will need for the future. And this quote here is a quote from one of the CEOs who participated in that survey. And this person said, for our industry, some skills can be learned on the job, but it all comes down to the individual's attitude and keenness to learn. And I think that's where the value of the work that all of you are doing, which is that commitment to lifelong learning, is really starting to bear fruit. So we must ensure that our school leavers and our future workers have the attitude and transferable skills that our industries require. And coming back to Lily and Maya, 30% of school students in 2030 will be Māori. And that cohort will then move into our workforce. So our workplaces absolutely must be rangatahi ready. They absolutely must be equipped to meet the needs of Māori and to be understanding how we can benefit from a greater understanding of Te Ao Māori and a commitment to a wellbeing approach to our community. So rangatahi in Christchurch need to have equitable access to support to achieve positive outcomes. And that's where I feel so positive about some of those initiatives that are operating within Linwood and Hayata and all of the fruit that we've borne from those initiatives, because we are really starting to think differently about how our education system serves young Māori in particular. And then finally, education and industry need to continue to adapt. It goes without saying, our world is changing profoundly. As I said at the start, the workforce is dramatically different from that I entered 25 years ago. When I graduated from university and went into my first job, it was a workplace where people were still smoking. There were hardly any computers. Everybody in the workplace was called by their surname. We had things thrown at us. It was just an entirely different environment from that we work within now. That is no longer acceptable. We have to treat people quite differently in our workplaces, but we also need different skills as we enter into a workplace, not just the ability to dodge a flying stapler. So education, therefore, must be much more closely connected to business and to the economy to deliver on the future of work. And this is where I feel really optimistic about initiatives like this, which is seeking to understand what industry needs to make sure that our young people have the skills for the future of industry, but also that industry is thinking about our young people and what their needs are, making sure our workplaces are equipped to meet the expectations of young people who have quite a different set of expectations than people of my generation and older. So to conclude, I'm really optimistic about the future of work. I'm really optimistic about the future of our young people, but we need to be deliberate and intentional in terms of creating that smart, sustainable city that we want and equipping our young people with the skills that they need and that our workplaces need for the future. So kia ora koutou, thank you all for the enormously powerful work that you all do. It's a great privilege to work alongside you all. And I'm happy now to have a chat with Ali about any of the issues arising. Kia ora.
Kia ora. I think it's a chat with myself, Cheryl, and Erica. And hopefully the rest who want to or have any questions would be brilliant. So, what a fantastic presentation, because it really gives an insight into not only how the city is thinking, but also how we as a region can respond and connect to that thinking and that kaupapa as well. So I have many questions, but I'm going to start with one, with the hopes that the whānau that's on here now can throw in and ask you some things. So this clear roadmap for recovery, and many years ago I used to present on innovation ecosystems. It was a big part of the thinking then, and still a big part now. So as we move through with the roadmap, we are starting to really get our heads around, I suppose, the learning ecosystem that's within our own region and internationally and just outside the borders, and pull that into that place-based learning. Do you think that we are connected as possibly as best we can, learning to this roadmap recovery that you've constructed?
Look, it's a great question. I think what COVID has shown us is that we need to be able to move really, really quickly when events occur. And in fact, we learned that through the quake period as well, although we may have forgotten some of the lessons and then had to quickly relearn them or remind ourselves once COVID hit us. I think there is more room for greater connections. What we see is that when people are under duress, individual institutions and organisations can turn inward really, really quickly. And if you don't have strong foundational connections that exist prior to an event that puts you under duress, that can be the impact. I think we're fortunate in Canterbury that our community is small enough that those connections do exist, but we need to continue to work hard at those, Ellie. So I think your question is a really good one, in that it needs to be intentional. We need to have a formal system for connection, and that's why we've invested into the innovation ecosystem across multiple parts of the ecosystem, on the condition that they're actually joined up, because otherwise this really good activity happens in isolation of what's happening elsewhere. And if it's not joined up, then people are not pathwaying, and people don't have choice. So they can't choose which part of the system they participate in, and the competition can become unhelpful. So if I'm completely blunt, we can do better, but we're making some really good steps, and we've got some advantages in Canterbury that give us some opportunities to do that.
Mm. And I just want to ask this. We're noticing, and we've been noticing now for a few years, the importance regarding ethics, principles, meaning, purpose. You know, all that good stuff that aids us to move forward, and also to move forward in unity. And putting learning in behind self-reflection and learning more about ourselves, so we can better understand the people in front of us and around us, is becoming key. So from when I look at the skills list that you had before, all those things at the top encompass, I suppose, how to be a human.
Yeah.
So do you find you're finding importance in this as you're going through those surveys and
absolutely.
And things? Could you?
Absolutely. Young people in particular talk a lot about values, and again, I reflect on when I entered the workforce, there was never a conversation about our values. Nobody stopped to talk to me about my view of the world, or what it was like to be a young woman entering a largely male-dominated workforce. That just wasn't a thing. You just survived based on the skills, the technical skills that you had. Now it's very, very different. Our young people expect to be thinking about the contribution that they are making to the world and our communities around us. They expect us as leaders to be thinking about those things and helping them realise their aspirations. That can be really, really challenging when you're busy and you just want to get on with getting a particular job done. Just not good enough anymore. And I think that's the challenge for all of us. I can see you all nodding. We've just got to make the time to think about our values and where they fit in with our society.
And continually self-reflect. Can we open this floor up to questions from the floor whilst you have this this lovely lady? Economic discussion, anyone on a Friday?
I love it when I show a lot of graphs on a Friday. Everyone's like, oh no, it's about the weekend.
Okay, well then I'm gonna I just want to jump in with this regarding the economy. I think we're all understanding that it's going a certain way, and I don't think none of us want to talk about any more troughs. We've had the trough conversation. So how do we as responsible citizens, I suppose, and as learners, engage to ensure that we are doing all we can to aid in lifting this economy and as best we can as the days go by?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that's really important for everybody to do, and I say this a lot when I speak to businesses and also to business organisations, is we need to make sure that we're discerning fact from fiction. And there's a lot of speculation at the moment, and it's really important that when we speculate about the future of the economy, we look at some of the data. What the data is showing us is that the economy is actually performing well. We have a strong economic base to build upon. New Zealand's performance through COVID has been absolutely world leading, and that is a strong platform that we must build upon. But we have this habit as Kiwis and as Cantabrians of talking ourselves down. Oh, we've had a hard time, and it's all going to go to hell in a handbasket. We absolutely need to build on our strengths and take an opportunities-based approach rather than a deficit-based approach. All of the educators in the room will just facepalm for me at the moment, but it's growth mindset is the language used in the education community. Did I get that right, Cheryl? It's true of the economy as well. Economies are built on confidence, and if people feel confident about the future based on the actual data, then they will make decisions to invest in their businesses and to invest in their workforce. It's really, really critical that is the next step, that we hold our confidence, that we invest in our businesses and therefore invest into our communities.
Brilliant. Cheryl.
Yeah, you saw me unmute, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah. Yeah, so I love the examples that you gave and the coherency that you're trying to grow across the wider city. And the bit of the puzzle that I'm interested in your comments on is the part that hasn't been talked about. We've got the industry and businesses, and we've got the schools and the tertiary, but there's this thing called parents, and the role that they play in supporting the growth of this amazing city and ensuring that those things on the graph, the team skills, etc., are valued and explored by them as well, so that they're in the loop. What are your thoughts?
Wow. Oh, look, I'd love to hear other people's opinion on this. I am a parent, but that by no means makes me a parenting expert. But one of the, I did actually have a slide which I didn't include in this deck, is that one of the dimensions that we're seeing coming through is parental anxiety about the future. Yeah. And what that means in terms of the kind of conversations that are had at home and how it flows through to the learning decisions that young people are making. As a parent, I do have anxiety for my children for the future, but I also see this enormous hope in that everything is to play for. And this generation, my kids' generation, I've got an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old, they will be the ones who are shaping quite a different world from that we're in. So as I'm encouraging my kids to make learning decisions, I'm talking to them about really understanding the humanities, so we understand social science, developing, yes, the technical skills, but also thinking about their values and how they interact with their friends and with their community, and really helping that sense of community understanding, because as you've seen from all of those industry leaders, that is what is going to be important for them for the future. The skills that the skills that young people need will be taught on the job. They will not be taught in our educational institutions. The attributes is what our educational institutions and what us as parents can help our young people with, and that's that collaboration, teamwork, kindness, ability to understand others. That's just not the stuff that I learned about as a young person necessarily.
Yeah, agreed. Stuart's
Just
got a
wanted to,
thumb.
yes,
Yeah,
I wanted to just comment on that as well and expand on the COVID lockdown really highlighted the importance of parents' role in a young person's learning journey. And I know that, you know, the supporting local hashtag was used a lot during COVID. It's not really just about that financial transaction of supporting local business, but I saw a increase in the engagement with our community organizations, with our community you know, parks that, you know, next door to my house, you know, how people are starting to engage with their neighbors. And so it's that social architecture that has enabled us to really see and actually interact with physically in terms of how important that is in our learning journey. And within ourselves as parents, as members of society, and how our sort of interconnectedness is so important to help with this growth. So I just wanted to just comment on that, and it's actually a really positive thing to see.
Yeah, isn't it interesting, Erica? As we've all stopped travelling, we've in many ways, our neighbourhoods have become really important to us. They are now, you know, our worlds have got smaller in some ways from a physical point of view. And so that importance of really engaging at a neighbourhood level just feels so much more prescient if you're not constantly travelling outside of the area that you live within. And I think that, again, that's one of those really powerful, positive things that have come through COVID is actually we've got great things going on right here, and that's really, really exciting. We're seeing that with the way Kiwis are moving around New Zealand, experiencing new parts of New Zealand, but also we as Cantabrians are, you know, just enjoying the richness that we have here in Canterbury, which I just feel we're incredibly blessed to live in this part of the world.
Absolutely. Stuart.
Hi, good morning, kia ora again. I see you all again. I'm very interested in the part about the attributes, because that really is an area that I'm very keen to see how we actually do this. My gut feeling, or my feeling originally about this is it's not what we teach, it's how we teach and how we actually educate. And our practices within the classroom can foster these attributes really quite clearly. And I'm very intrigued. I looked at what Marion's posted on the chat room about embedding it in ARA. I wonder if you can give us a bit of an outline on that, Marion. I'd be interested to hear.
Yes.
Sure. Sorry, I'll just, so you can see me. You have to excuse me, I'm working at home today, so I'm in my sweats. So what actually, it was part, my team leader, Sue McBain, has actually been very instrumental in making sure that we've got a series of graduate attributes that we would like to see in all of our graduates. And so it's been made into part of a teaching and learning framework, which we're actually starting to socialise at the moment. It's just something that's been developed. Well, it's been in development for a while, but it's you know, it's made it up as far as our, you know, our top level of brass, if you want to call it that, at ARA. And so that's starting to be socialised now. And so all our program development and stuff is going to be taking that teaching, learning and teaching framework into account, which includes all the attributes and what we would like to see in our graduates. So it was those top 5 skills, but there was also around cultural abilities and being global citizens, and also sustainability was another large one that wasn't in that list. But yeah, we're really excited about how it's being embraced, and actually, you know, we should see it more explicitly in our programs coming through, and not just this knowledge and skills that come with that learning area.
Yeah, it's a really interesting space. We've also been looking at a number of not only profiling tools, but tools that enable us to understand our characteristics, our primary core strengths. So really building upon the knowledge of our own value addition. So we've started doing value addition mapping from this. So this builds confidence, because yes, I am good at that. I am a bull at a gate, but that also gives me a wee bit of a confidence to go and to be bold, you know. So how do we I agree with you, how do we actually pull this out? So we've got strength identification modules that we're currently looking at, profiling modules, self-reflection, you know, bringing in, I remember back in MIT those days, back in 1990, whatever it was, and we were doing self-awareness courses. You know, where are those modules, and where is that thinking within our learning ecosystem? And who the people that are involved within the learning ecosystem, what are they doing in that space? And is there something that we can share here with each other to be able to give ourselves a better sense of self? And I don't want to get all quotey about know thyself, but it's so true, right? Because when we know ourselves and what our value proposition is, we're better able to move in the spaces that to go where needed, you know, which is where our world is going to. So it's a brilliant corridor and conversation to have.
I'm not sure if anybody else, was it you? Oh, sorry, Joanna.
I was going to ask a question, so you go.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm not sure if anybody else had the opportunity to attend some of the ULEARN conference that was online last week, but that's definitely the focus, I think, moving forward for education. They seem to be looking more at, you know, focusing on strengths and, yeah, rather than measuring against. Yeah, sorry, I haven't quite got it clear in my head because I'm still processing it. Right. But yeah, it's much more a strengths-based approach to teaching rather than measuring against, you know, old, outdated factory models of education.
Yeah, let's concentrate on those weaknesses. Let's fill the gap there instead of focusing on strengths and self-efficacy, and that's the thinking. Brilliant.
I've got a question for the educators on this call in relation to that. And it comes back to the parental piece. Is parents, Gen X parents, who have grown up in quite a different system, will be saying, well, but what about the skills? What about the maths, the literacy, you know, what people used to call the basics? How do educators manage that tension from a set of parental expectations when actually we know what is required as the attributes versus necessarily just a pure focus on things that are traditional parts of learning?
I'm desperately trying to be quiet.
Go on, Cheryl. Get into it.
Go on, Cheryl.
I wish there was a simple answer.
Yeah, I think if I take and it's not just schools in Ōtautahi, but across the country, this is a real struggle because there is that tension as if it's one or the other and not both. And as you'll know, sometimes the media doesn't help in that space, because the polarizing nature of the conversations becomes really difficult, and for schools, they get caught in the middle because they are saying exactly that it's the attributes and skills, being able to work together, etc., that are critical, and not saying that you don't therefore have any content or that literacy and numeracy aren't important, but it's partly a messaging issue, and it's one that schools across the city feel a lot of pain about, because that's often the anxiety, because you know all parents want the best for their kids. I've got two grandkids in the city, and you know, I want the best for them, but I want them to be able to thrive in the world that we're preparing them for, not the past. And I see there's still a lot of that pull back to the safety, especially in uncertain times of structure and timetabling and streaming and the things that actually we need to let go of?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point around how we package the message, and that's where I feel that voice of industry can be quite powerful, because when a parent who is anxious about their children's job prospects hears that actually CEOs want kids with teamwork, it helps have a different conversation with the educators, that dialogue and dynamic between parents and educators. So that industry piece, I feel, is an important part of that communication.
So
dialogue.
Exactly, and educating those leaders and dare I say those people that sit within those boards as well. Educating that is a massive part of this piece, because we can all do all these wonderful things, but if we have barriers at a certain level, or perhaps I don't want to use the word ignorance, but just a lack of knowledge in that space for how learning and how the messaging of learning comes from that space, then we have problems. So, but there's many of us who are working in that space to try and aid in either mindset, engaging and shifting mindsets, or aiding in the learning of those leaders to work with us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Kia ora koutou, thanks. Kia ora, Joanna, thanks. That was my question too, just following on. So I'm Jennifer Lay from Ako Ōtautahi-Learning. So we're around working with the professional and learning development of tertiary educators across the sector, so from wānanga, adult community education, universities, polytechs, industry, and private training. And so one of the challenges I find in that role, as just being one manager in the whole of the South Island, is how to share that messaging that you're talking about, Joanna, from industry to tertiary educators who like to, well, not all, because Marion's kōrero is just totally encouraging about what ARA are doing, but it's about just how to encourage educators to think more about enabling learners to focus on attributes rather than the skills. I know we've talked a lot about that happening, but how do we get that sort of communication happening between industry and educators at a tertiary level as well as the other education sectors too? Do you have any, great ideas that will solve it all?
I don't, but I do see areas of hope. And when I think about the Supernode clusters that we've built, which includes industry and educators and iwi, as well as local government and government, that's where that type of conversation happens. And the type of thing I typically hear from industry is that we will teach the skills. The skills that we have within our business cannot necessarily be taught within the system. There's some basics, but then we will teach the specifics once they enter our workplace. And certainly as an employer, that's been my experience as a senior manager for a number of great many years now. You teach the skills on the job. What we want is people with the ability to learn and the ability to communicate and the ability to listen. To answer your question specifically, Jennifer, I think marrying educators with industry regularly and often through those city networks and through national networks is one of the most powerful vehicles, because then educators can say with confidence to learners and to parents who are supporting learners make their choices, actually, this will get you a job, because fundamentally we all need jobs to support prosperity. So that to me feels quite a powerful starting point, is those connections and those industry clusters alongside educators, iwi and government. And
how would people get involved with those, Joanna? I mean, it's probably... Yeah, I can talk more maybe about that.
Yeah, yeah. So there's lots of information about the Supernodes on our website, which is christchurchnz.com. Yep. There's also strong connections in through the tertiaries themselves, and then through learning networks such as this, and the whole team at Ako Ōtautahi do a fabulous job in connecting people across our city. So I just do want to commend Cheryl and the rest of the team.
Excellent. I agree that the Supernodes is this, it provides some coherency for those conversations. I think it's a really exciting place to start.
Agreed.
I think one of the challenges we've also got is how schools or education measure themselves. I'm looking at the metrics that we compare each other with, and we still go to the traditional subjects, the traditional methods, and we measure ourselves on pass rates of these sciences and all these other areas, all the bits of traditional stuff. Yeah, if we can look at the metrics and change that a wee bit and get other measures, that would be really impressive. But poor old schools are under the pressure to achieve these numbers.
How are metrics changed within the system?
Yeah.
How are they changed? I mean, is there a mechanism to change, or do we continue to move through?
Yeah, outcomes-based measures are really, really important, but very, very hard. And we talk about this a lot within our organisation and within the city. Measuring outputs is really easy. Measuring pass rates is really easy. It's quick, it's tangible, quick turnaround times, quick feedback loops. Measuring outcomes, as in where do young people end up once they leave? How do they progress through their career? Much harder and longer, and you've got to have patience.
Yeah.
So I'd start with a 4-year political term. Just saying, so that we can have these bigger systemic conversations as a country.
Awesome.
Great, and that's probably a good place to start wrapping up, Ellie.
Yes.
It's been a great conversation. Everything we had hoped, far-ranging conversations, and because we're recording this, it'll be shared far and wide and have a lot of ripples, I think, and ongoing conversations with ChristchurchNZ, and that connection between education and industry, I think, is a critical one. So I'm just going to share my screen briefly to finish, and let's get on to the, oh, in a minute, go back to stop screen sharing for a little moment and try that again. So this is one of our last events for the week for our learning days, and it's been a pleasure to host this event. It's brought to you by Learning City Christchurch, Ako Ōtautahi. This is how you can get in touch with us through our website, learningscitychristchurch.nz, or you can email us for further information. And just like to finish before we start to disperse with our whakatauki that has been given to us from Mataraka Mahanui, from Ngāi Tahu. O ka hātia tō waka, kia kumia e te au, kia puhia e te hau, ka huri noa tia tō hoi, ka aro tono tia ka whetū. Tighten the bindings of your waka so that when pulled upon by the tides and blown by the winds, you can but turn your paddle and continue to heed the stars. And I think that's a great message for us all as we continue to heed the stars, even though we're pulled in all sorts of different directions. So thanks everyone for turning up today and for the great free-ranging conversations. Thanks, Ellie, for coordinating that. And most of all, thank you, Joanna, for your kōrero and sharing such insights and such up-to-date information. And we thank you for that and your continued work for the city.
Kia ora. Ka kite, everybody.
Ai,
Ka kite.
ka kite.